Hello, good people. Welcome to Happy, Healthy, Whole with Sharia. I am your host, Sharia Farmer, and I am excited to have you join us this beautiful day. Depending on where you are, the weather is different. But today's show, like all, are about making sure that we prioritize our healing and our self-love as Black women. And today we're going to talk a little bit about unmasking the unforeseen realities of trauma and embracing healing. And so for the purpose of making this an interactive experience, if you haven't already, go ahead and like our channel and subscribe to our channel. Also, if you are following me on my different social media platforms, use the hashtag healing in joy. That's healing in the joy hashtag, and I will be checking that or using that hashtag to try to resonate with our community and to keep us kind of focused. So if you have a question, if you have any kind of thought or something that comes to you that you want to make sure that you share with the audience or share with others, use that hashtag so that I can check it out. And I will be checking in, even if it's a question, every now and then to find out if I can support you. We also are going to do something called to heal or not to heal, which is really an affirmation moment for us to take a break, pause, and really get to know each other around these areas. And so today is healing or to heal or not to heal moment or affirmation is I deserve to unmask the realities of the trauma I experienced. Again, that's I deserve to unmask the realities of the trauma that I have experienced. And really, I want you to think about this healing or not to heal moment where you could really think about what are the things I need on my journey to make that affirmation true? What are the things that I need on in my support system, in those loving environments that we create for ourselves, or do I need to even create that loving environment? So again, today, to heal or not to heal is just reinforcing what it is that I need and that I deserve as I unmask the unforeseen realities of trauma and I truly embrace healing. All right, so let's get started. Today we have a few points on really looking at what happens when trauma and our experience of trauma happened to us. And so I thought about it from experiencing trauma and how it can lead to so many different emotional, psychological, and physical responses. And so trying to keep this down to our goal being under 10 to 15 minutes or 15 minutes, trying to keep this down is going to be important. So I'm going to make some points. And if you have any questions where or would like additional information on any of the points, please feel free to express that in the comments and I'll do a whole video on just that question if it is something that multiple people like or actually think is important to clarify. So let's recognize just a few things about normalizing trauma. And that is that most of us have reactions that are either emotional, psychological, or physical in reference to trauma that we may have experienced. And so, really, when we think about one of the ones that most people will talk about is this form of like denial, which is this shock and disbelief. And how it might show up for each person is extremely different. But what happens when we experience trauma, this immediately after the traumatic event, individuals may experience a sense of like, I'm not present, or I'm disassociating from this moment, or this disbelief that something could even happen to me. So this can manifest with a number of different people differently. So some of us might numb up, some of us might detach, like I said earlier, and others might have a difficulty accepting what is truly occurring. So then I go into denial. So that's first one is shock and disbelief. The next one is flashbacks and intrusive thoughts. When someone has experienced different types of trauma, because we're not talking about the types today, just some of the normal things that we might experience. Sometimes that also looks like flashbacks or intrusive thoughts. What this means is that the survivor of that traumatic experience has these intrusive memories or flashbacks of the traumatic event. And so that could be of the abuse, that could be of a car accident, it could be of anything that happened that was considered traumatic to you and your system. And now, as a response, your body is, or you're having distressful, intrusive thoughts related to that actual occurrence of trauma. And so that's number two. Number three, that I think a lot of us kind of can recognize depending on how we do this, but avoidance. People may go into this great deal of conversation, actions to really avoid that the to avoid the reminders of trauma. That includes places, people, activities associated with the event that may have been traumatic. And then ultimately avoiding the becomes the coping mechanism that the person uses to protect oneself from, say, emotional responses that might come up as related to a trauma. And so, for example, this could be if I have experienced trauma as a child and I experience yelling or screaming. So I might find myself literally hearing or seeing someone kind of reacting similar, and I'm out. I don't wonder if they need help. I don't wonder if there is something going on, and it really isn't about me in that moment. It's just I need to respond with what I know I can do, which is to avoid. And so I leave the situation. So really, this one can look different for each of us. Sometimes it's avoiding relationships altogether because we don't want to risk getting hurt. Sometimes it's avoiding the possibility of being a parent or a caregiver because I don't want to mimic or relive the events that may have happened to me, and I don't know yet what it takes to do differently. Or even know what I deserved differently. The next one is hyperarousal. When a person experiences trauma, you can automatically go into what is considered an increased amount of alertness. This could look like anxiety or difficulty relaxing. I use the example when I'm talking about racial trauma for this one, where sometimes we are driving in a car and we're a person of color and we see the police down the road or even behind us, and we know that we're not breaking any laws, we're not doing anything that is considered illegal, but just seeing the police behind us automatically brings this level of hyper alertness. Like, am I doing everything right? Oh my God, if they stop me, do I have my license? Do I have my right? So, oh my God, if they stop me, will I go home? Right. So then all of a sudden, this level of hyper alertness that comes upon us creates anxiety, irritability, and even in some cases it can, and not just using the one example I did, but in some cases it can bring about insomnia where we can't sleep, or agitation where we are responding and startled very easily around things. So thinking about hyperarousal as this state of alertness is a good way to look at it. Another example of what could be considered a normal response to trauma is really guilt and shame. A lot of us grapple with this one because the feelings of guilt and shame have us questioning the actions of that we may have taken or blaming ourselves for the traumatic event. And what I like to do when I'm working with people is to first really kind of name the truth and to kind of talk to them about the reality that the trauma or the traumatic event is not their fault, and that we can learn different ways or different things to do to respond to traumatic events, but that does not mean that we were the cause of them. And it's important to emphasize, to me especially, that trauma is not the fault of the individual who's experiencing it. And so really making sure that you work with that guilt and shame, but understanding that it is actually a part of a natural response, even if it's not the right, even if it's not the truth. Um, Another response that happens with relationships is really about a change in your mood in the relationship. So you are really kind of thinking, I don't want to be around people. I'm not feeling connected, or I feel a level of sadness or anger or just emotional numbness, right? Because it may not even look like these outburst alertness ones like agitation, anxiety, or even sadness, it may look like a level of numbness where it's like I'm feeling nothing. I don't feel connected. I don't feel um, like I desire to be connected. And so these relationships may be strained as a result of the trauma that you've experienced, even if that individual is not connected to the actual traumatic experience. And I think that's important because sometimes when it comes to it being someone connected to the traumatic experience, we get it. We understand that's the reality of what I'm dealing with or how I've dealt with the trauma. But when it comes to, say, relationships that we've formed in healthy and mutual agreements on how to treat each other, sometimes even those relationships get impacted based off of that traumatic experience, especially when it's unresolved. And so I'm not going to talk about unresolved today. We're just talking about the general responses. And then some physical symptoms that can be contributed to trauma are things like headaches, stomach aches, muscle tension, just think of it like almost any stress related symptom that you may experience, right? So for me, that is sometimes dizziness, sometimes headaches that lead to dizziness, sometimes it's stomach cramps or feeling agitation in my stomach, feeling hotness or warmth in my chest in areas that are like really tensed in my body. So it might be muscle tension in my shoulders or the clenching of my cheeks or my mouth and my jaw area, so that it's like I'm holding it in. You'll notice sometimes the clutching of your hands, things that are physical responses that might be related to a traumatic event. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to get all of them. You might not get any, but you may not even notice some of them. Shortness of breath, shortness, this heartbeat, this as we think about the hyperarousal and the reality of your heart beating really quickly. So those are just some of the things that we think about when it comes to normal responses. And the last one, and I think just to add it because it's hyper alert, which is one way where I'm scanning the where I kind of know that anything could happen and I'm anxious over it. But then there's hypervigilance where I'm actually constantly scanning environments to for potential threats. And so then using that same example of the police, I'm looking for in advance, where would they be located? Should I take that road down that way? Because if they're there, they could stop me and take my life, right? I'm hyper vigilant about how I might even sit or how I speak when I'm talking to an officer. I'm doing all of these things in response to the reality of traumatic things that may have happened to myself or my ancestors or even my peers. And knowing that that hyper alertness is the experience of the emotional response within me, but this hypervigilance is me scanning the environments that I'm a part of and having to navigate it in a way that says at any point that trauma that I've experienced or am aware of can happen to me. So the reality is by acknowledging and normalizing these reactions that we talked about today, it helps individuals and ourselves understand that your responses are normal part of traumatic events happening and a natural um, coping process that happens in our bodies, minds, and spirits. And so seeking that mental health support, that professional support, friends and family, and really understanding how to navigate the healing journey specific to your trauma is extremely important. So just to run through them really quickly one last time, there is shock and disbelief, flashbacks and intrusive thoughts, avoidance, hyperarousal, guilt and shame, change in mood in any relationship, physical symptoms, and hypervigilance. These are just some of what can be considered the normal responses or reactions to trauma. And one of the first things to do to help us on our journey is to acknowledge, understand, and truly respect that when we experience trauma, there are reactions that are within or and also without outside of our control, and how important it is for us to get the help that is specific to our needs. All right. I want everybody to take good care of themselves. Again, this is, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. Next week, we'll be talking a little bit more about taking care of ourselves in response to trauma, and also building some support system over the next few weeks. I should say we'll be talking about a number of things. All right, I want you to take good care of yourselves. Be well.